Welcome back. I'm glad that you've gathered around the fire with me again to hear this fascinating story. The story which has kept hope in our people for more than 1,000 years. It's the story of God's journey with our people, with the children of Abraham. It's the story of the promises and the long waiting that we've gone to. It's our story of our hope about what God is doing and that need to wait faithfully for Him to do it. We know that God has promised to do great things, and yet we know that we are like people walking in the darkness. The light of God has not come into the world as we would like it to. We are waiting for the Messiah to appear, to do great things. And as we wait, we are to be people who are filled with hope, who wait eagerly for God to act. We are to be a holy people, living in obedience, preparing ourselves to see and recognize the Messiah. And as we wait, as we hope, we live in confidence that we are God's treasured possession, that God is working to accomplish His purposes, and He's going to use us to do that. That's one of the joyous parts of this message. And the reality is, this message ought to fill us with joy. But you may ask, how can we be joyous when the story seems filled with so many failures, such long waiting? We even see sin and the rejection of the people by God. We might think in this situation, anger or frustration, sadness or guilt, those would be the appropriate feelings, but not joy. How can we feel joy? Joy would seem to be furthest from our minds. But that great prophet Isaiah, who writes in the midst of the darkness as the nation is falling under sin, as the nation of Israel is going into captivity, he writes repeatedly about joy. Not only joy at some future time, but joy that can be ours right now. Joy that we can possess even in this moment. And he gives us at least 7 reasons why we should have joy. He says God is coming to our rescue, to our salvation. It's a story about God's care for us. It's a story about God selecting us to be His people. It's about the story of God restoring and promising that the land and creation will become what it was designed to be. It's a story about how God is bringing justice to the nations and to the peoples and to our people. It's a story of God's return to us. And it's a story of eternal hope. So Isaiah says, first of all, in speaking about God's salvation, he says, I will still praise you, Lord. Although you are angry with me, you've turned away. You've let go of your anger, and you've come to the comfort of your people. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust Him and not be afraid. The Lord Himself is my strength and my salvation, my shield. Our God has become our salvation. And so with joy, I will drink water from the well of salvation. God is going to rescue us. God is going to bring His salvation to us because God is a God of care and compassion. Isaiah again says, shout for joy, you heavens. Rejoice, you earth. Burst into song, you mountains. For the Lord comforts His people. He has had compassion on his afflicted ones. So there is God's compassion. There is God's care. There is God's desire to bring salvation. And there's his calling for us to be his people. Isaiah says, listen. Listen to what I have to say. Listen. You who pursue righteousness and you who seek God. Remember the rock from which you've been cut. Remember the quarry from which you've been hewn. Abraham is your father. Sarah is the one who gave birth to you. And remember, Abraham was one man, and yet he has become many. The Lord will surely come to the comfort of Zion. He will look in compassion on all her ancient ruins. He will make the deserts like Eden, and the wilderness like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found in her. Thanksgiving and the sound of singing. The Lord rescued the people. And when those rescued ones return, they will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will be their crown. Gladness and joy will overtake them. Sorrow and sighing will flee away. So we have the calling to be God's people. We have the calling to be the kinds of people who recognize God's compassion, God's care, God's salvation. But we also know the promise is that God will transform the world. God will make the desert bloom, we've already heard. He'll make the wilderness like a garden. He is the one who's going to make the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame leap like joy. He's the one who's going to preach the good news to the poor. He's the one who's going to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free. He's the one who's going to make all of creation this beautiful, wonderful paradise where lamb and wolf can lie down together. The cow and the bear can be together. The calf, the yearling, and the lion will be together, and a little child will lead them. And beyond that, it goes on to talk about the child lying by the cobra's den and not being harmed. And he says, they will neither harm nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. What a glorious image of what is coming. And then he says, you will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills will burst into song. The trees of the field will clap their hands. The thorn bush, there will no longer be the thorn bush, but there will be the myrtle. And instead of briars, there will be a juniper tree. And this will be for the Lord's renown, for an everlasting sign that will endure forever. So there is the restoration of the world. There's the bringing of justice. The people walking in the darkness, Isaiah says, have seen a great light. Those living in the shadow of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You will increase the nation's size. You will increase their joy. They will rejoice like those men gathering the harvest, like the warriors who are dividing the plunder. In the day of Midian's defeat, the yoke will be broken. The bonds will be loosed. The oppression will be released. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be for the burning, for fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born. Unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulders, and he will be called the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. He will sit on the throne of his father David, upholding it with righteousness and justice from this time on and forever. This is the promise. This is why we can have such great joy. And then above all that, God himself, as we said before, will come back. Arise, shine, your light has come. The glory of the Lord rises upon you. You see, the land is covered with darkness. A thick darkness is over the people. But the Lord appears. His glory rises above us. And nations will come to the light, and the kings to the brightness of your dawn. God will be radiant. This is joy. And then finally, there is the eternal hope. No longer will violence be heard in the land, or ruin and destruction in your borders. You will call them the walls of salvation, and your gates will be called praise. You'll no longer need the light of the sun by day. You'll no longer need the brightness of the moon to shine on you. The Lord will be your everlasting light. Your God will be your glory. The sun will never set again. Your moon will wane no more. The Lord will be your everlasting light. And your days of sorrow will end. This is why we can rejoice. Even though we're waiting, even though we live in the land of darkness right now, we have joy because we have hope. We have hope that God is bringing salvation, that he cares and he has compassion. He's called us as a people. He's going to restore the world. He's going to bring justice. He himself is going to come and he's going to give us eternal hope. That is why we can rejoice, even as we wait. Even as we walk in the darkness. Amen.